Welcome, my friend. Come in, sit down, and breathe. If you have found your way here, to the elevated within, it is not by accident. You are here because there is a silent, restless hum beneath the surface of your life, a profound dissonance between the immense size of your mind and the frustrating reality of your daily execution. Before we step into the depths of this conversation, I want to ask you, as a brother walking this path beside you, to take a brief moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you are not just supporting me, you are casting a vote for your own growth. You are planting your flag in the ground and declaring to the algorithm, and more importantly to yourself, that you are ready to rise above the noise, to build this community of elevation, and to demand more from the infinite potential locked inside of you. Now let us speak the truth about the invisible war you are fighting. I know the secret you carry. It is a beautiful, agonizing secret. You possess an intellect that is formidable, perhaps even terrifying in its capacity. You have a high IQ. You see the world in high definition, recognizing patterns, connecting disparate ideas, and visualizing complex futures with a speed that leaves others standing still. When you are interested, when your mind catches fire, your cognitive processing is a marvel to behold. You can consume entire libraries of information in a weekend. You can architect entire businesses, write symphonies, or solve intricate problems in the shower before you've even had your morning coffee. Yet, there is a shadow to this brilliance. You also have ADHD. This combination, the gifted intellect paired with an attention deficit neurobiology, creates what I call the golden cage. It is a paradox so cruel and so frustrating that it can drive the most brilliant souls to the edge of despair. It is the experience of having the engine of a Formula One race car, capable of breaking every speed record on the track, but discovering, much to your horror, that this magnificent machine has been equipped with the brakes of a child's bicycle, and the steering wheel is entirely disconnected from the tires. You know exactly where the finish line is. You can see it clearly. You have calculated the precise aerodynamics required to get there. But when you press the pedal, the car spins out of control, distracted by a passing shadow, a sudden thought, or the overwhelming urge to check a screen. This is not a character flaw. I need you to hear me clearly, my friend. This is not a moral failing, a lack of innate goodness, or a symptom of laziness. For too long, you have been crushed under the weight of expectations, both from the world and from your own piercing self-awareness. You have watched people with half your intellect, half your vision, and half your raw talent pass you by, simply because they possess the mundane, unglamorous ability to sit at a desk and do the boring thing for 2 hours straight. You have lived in the gap between your profound potential and your actual output, and that gap is a breeding ground for a quiet, consuming shame. To understand why this happens, we must strip away the emotional baggage and look at the cold, hard architecture of your brain. We must look to the giants of neuroscience who have charted this turbulent territory. Dr. Russell Barkley, one of the foremost authorities on ADHD, has dedicated his life to explaining this exact phenomenon. According to Dr. Barkley's foundational research, ADHD is not primarily a disorder of attention at all. It is a disorder of executive functioning and self-regulation. Think of executive function as the CEO of your brain. It is the department responsible for planning, organizing, initiating tasks, regulating emotions, and, crucially, bridging the gap between time and action. In a neurotypical brain, this CEO sits at a grand mahogany desk, looking at the long-term goals, and smoothly dispatches orders to the rest of the body to execute the necessary, often tedious steps to reach that goal. In your brain, that CEO is absent, locked out of the office, or utterly overwhelmed. Dr. Barkley articulates a concept that should be etched into the mind of every high IQ individual with ADHD. ADHD is not a knowledge deficit. It is a performance deficit. You do not need to be taught what to do. Your high IQ guarantees that you already know what to do better than almost anyone else in the room. You have read the books. You have watched the tutorials. You have mapped out the entire strategic plan in your head with flawless logic. The tragedy lies in the fact that your brain's neurochemistry fails to execute that knowledge at the point of performance. You are a master architect who possesses the most brilliant blueprints the world has ever seen, but the construction crew refuses to pick up their hammers. They are standing on the build site, looking at the blueprint, understanding it perfectly, but their bodies simply will not move. This separation between knowledge and action is the defining agony of your existence. You know you need to file the taxes, write the thesis, send the email, or build the business. You know it. Yet an invisible, paralyzing force field stands between your intention and your physical action. Why does this happen? Why does the construction crew strike? To answer this, we must descend into the chemical reality of your mind. We must talk about dopamine. Dopamine is the currency of motivation. It is the molecule of anticipation, reward, and drive. When a neurotypical person contemplates a long-term goal, like studying for an exam or building a career, their brain releases a steady, sufficient drip of dopamine that sustains their effort through the boring, mundane steps required to achieve it. The ADHD brain, however, is fundamentally starved of this critical neurotransmitter. You operate with a baseline dopamine deficit. Your brain's receptors are less efficient, meaning you are constantly, unconsciously roaming the environment, seeking a hit of stimulation just to feel normal, just to reach the baseline level of alertness that others wake up with naturally. This neurobiological reality makes you uniquely, dangerously vulnerable to the modern world. We live in an era that is entirely unprecedented in human history, as Dr. Anna Lemke masterfully details in her profoundly important book, Dopamine Nation. We have transformed the world from a place of scarcity into a place of overwhelming abundance. But it is an abundance of the most dangerous kind. Cheap, effortless, high-potency dopamine. The engineers of the modern digital landscape, the architects of social media algorithms, infinite scrolling feeds, and notification badges have weaponized psychology against you. They have built an environment that exploits your specific neurobiological weakness. If your brain is a starving animal desperately seeking sustenance, the modern smartphone is an all-you-can-eat buffet of refined sugar placed directly in your hands. When you feel that friction, that executive dysfunction, preventing you from starting the difficult, meaningful work that your high IQ demands, your dopamine-starved brain desperately looks for an escape hatch. And there it is, the glowing rectangle in your pocket. With a single swipe of your thumb, you are transported away from the quiet, demanding discomfort of the blank page or the unwritten business plan, and plunged into a hyper-stimulating river of novelty. Colors, sounds, outrage, humor, validation, fear, and desire are pumped directly into your retinas. Your brain, desperate for that chemical hit, lights up. For a fleeting moment, the anxiety of your unfulfilled potential vanishes, masked by the intoxicating rush of cheap digital stimulation. But it is a trap. It is the ultimate betrayal of your gifts. Dr. Lemke's research outlines the grim mechanics of this addiction. Because of the brain's relentless pursuit of homeostasis, a state of balance, every unnatural spike in dopamine is inevitably followed by a corresponding plunge into a dopamine deficit. The higher the unnatural peak, the deeper and darker the valley that follows. When you spend hours doom-scrolling, passively consuming the fragmented lives and thoughts of strangers, you are not resting. You are not recharging. You are systematically down-regulating your brain's own dopamine receptors. You are burning out your already compromised reward circuitry. This is the anatomy of the doom scroll. It is not just a bad habit, it is a neurological hijacking. You begin with the intention of taking a 5-minute break to clear your head. But the algorithm, powered by supercomputers processing trillions of data points, knows exactly what to show you next to keep your thumb moving. 5 minutes becomes an hour becomes 3. The afternoon bleeds into the evening, and then the phone is finally put down. The screen goes dark. In that silence, the rush fades, and the valley begins. You are left staring at the ceiling, feeling a profound, aching emptiness. Your mind feels like static. The tasks you were supposed to do remain undone, mocking you from the periphery of your awareness. The guilt washes over you like a physical weight. Your brilliant, high IQ mind turns its formidable processing power inward, generating a hyper-articulate stream of self-loathing. You dissect your failures with surgical precision, analyzing exactly how you have wasted another day, another week, another year. You realize, with a sinking heart, that you are trading your life, your finite, beautiful, unrepeatable life, for a stream of meaningless digital pixels. You are sacrificing the symphony you were meant to compose for the jarring, chaotic noise of the feed. This is the mediocre void. It is the graveyard of unactualized genius. It is the place where high IQ individuals with ADHD go to hide from the agonizing friction of doing the work. In this void, your intelligence becomes a curse. Because you are smart, you can rationalize your inaction. You can convince yourself that you are gathering research, or waiting for inspiration, or optimizing your workflow. Your intellect builds elaborate, convincing defenses to protect the addiction to cheap comfort. But deep down, in the quietest, truest part of your soul, you know it is a lie. You know that potential, unexpressed, turns toxic. It ferments inside of you into resentment, anxiety, and a deep, existential sorrow. You look at the titans of history, the great artists, scientists, and builders, and you know with absolute certainty that you possess the raw cognitive hardware to stand among them. You know that if you could just harness the lightning storm inside your head, you could move mountains. You could alter the fabric of your family's history. You could leave an indelible mark on this world. Yet, you remain paralyzed, caught between the gravity of your grand visions and the irresistible pull of the immediate cheap reward. You are trapped in the golden cage, holding the key in your own hand, but unable to command your fingers to turn the lock. This is the brutal reality we must face together. If you have a high IQ and ADHD, the default path of the modern world leads to ruin. The current of modern society flows towards distraction, apathy, and endless consumption. If you do not actively, fiercely paddle against this current, you will be swept over the waterfall into a life of bitter mediocrity. You will become a brilliant spectator in a life you were meant to command. You cannot outsmart this neurobiological trap. Your high IQ cannot save you here. In fact, it will only make the realization of your failure more painful. The solution does not lie in thinking harder, or understanding the problem more deeply, or waiting for a sudden miraculous wave of motivation to carry you to the shores of productivity. Motivation is a ghost. It is an illusion that visits you only when it pleases, usually at 2 a.m. when you cannot actually do the work. The stakes are unimaginably high. This is not merely about being more productive or crossing items off a to-do list. This is about the salvation of your destiny. It is about whether you will look back on your life from your deathbed with the quiet, profound satisfaction of a life fully expended, or with the agonizing, suffocating regret of a masterpiece left unpainted. You have the engine of a champion. But an engine, no matter how powerful, is entirely useless if it is not bolted to a chassis, connected to a transmission, and guided by a disciplined driver. Without a framework, power is just an explosion. To break free from the golden cage, we must stop relying on the erratic, unreliable sparks of raw intellect and fleeting motivation. We must accept the cold, hard truth of our neurobiology and begin the rigorous, unglamorous work of building the machinery of execution. We must learn to become the architects of our own behavior, bypassing the broken systems of our minds and building external structures that make greatness inevitable and mediocrity impossible. The journey out of the void requires a radical shift in perspective. It requires abandoning the myth that you are broken and accepting that you are simply operating a very complex piece of machinery without the user manual. It requires the courage to look at your daily habits with ruthless honesty and the willingness to tear down the comfortable, destructive patterns you have built. We are standing at the threshold. Behind you is the chaotic, unfulfilled past, littered with half-finished projects and the ashes of good intentions. In front of you is a steep, demanding mountain path. It will not be easy. It will require you to face the very friction you have spent your life running away from. But at the summit of that mountain lies the only thing that will ever truly satisfy your restless soul, the actualization of your true, immense power. The great tragedy of your life, my friend, did not begin with a failure. It began with a compliment. It began in a classroom or at a kitchen table, when a teacher or a parent looked at you in awe and spoke the words that would unknowingly forge the bars of your golden cage. They looked at your effortless comprehension, your rapid-fire connections, and your dazzling early achievements, and they said, "You are so smart. You have so much potential." In that moment, a profound and dangerous seed was planted in your fertile mind. You were handed a crown before you had ever fought a battle. And for a long time, that crown felt magnificent. You coasted. You absorbed information like a sponge, passing tests with a passing glance at the textbook while your peers labored for hours. You learned early on that your intellect was a magic trick, a skeleton key that could unlock almost any door without the friction of actual labor. But this is the insidious nature of raw potential. It is not a promise of future greatness. It is merely a measurement of capacity. And for the high IQ mind grappling with the hidden currents of ADHD, this early reliance on raw, unearned capability becomes a slow-acting poison. We must dismantle the myth of raw potential, right here and right now. We must tear down the comforting illusion that your intelligence alone will eventually, somehow, bridge the vast and agonizing gap between your grand intentions and your actual results. Because if you do not understand the mechanics of this myth, you will spend the rest of your life waiting for a train that is never going to arrive, wrapped in the suffocating warmth of a dangerous comfort. To understand why smart is the most dangerous label you could have ever received, we must turn to the brilliant work of psychologist Carol Dweck. In her landmark book, Mindset, Dweck outlines a psychological framework that perfectly captures the existential crisis of the gifted individual. She identifies two fundamental lenses through which we view our abilities: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. When you were praised entirely for your innate intelligence, for being smart rather than for your effort, your resilience, or your strategy, you were pushed forcefully into a fixed mindset. You internalized a deeply toxic equation: success equals intelligence, and effort equals a lack of intelligence. If you had to try hard at something, if you had to sweat and struggle and fail, it meant, in your deepest subconscious, that perhaps you were not the genius everyone thought you were. For the high IQ, ADHD brain, this fixed mindset is a death sentence for actualization. Why? Because the ADHD brain already possesses a biological aversion to the mundane, sustained effort required to build anything of lasting value. When you combine that biological friction with a psychological terror of looking foolish or incompetent, you create a perfect storm for paralysis. You become an expert at avoidance. You curate your life so that you only engage in tasks where your raw intellect guarantees an immediate, flawless victory. You start 100 brilliant projects, fueled by the intoxicating rush of sudden inspiration and the ease of conceptualization. You map out the entire app. You outline the entire novel. You design the entire business model in your head. But the moment the initial rush fades, the moment the work transitions from the frictionless realm of pure thought into the heavy, resistant realm of physical execution and tedious detail, you hit a wall. The fixed mindset whispers, "This is getting hard. If you were truly a genius, this would be easy. You must have picked the wrong project. You need to pivot." And your ADHD brain, desperate to escape the plummeting dopamine levels associated with boredom and frustration, enthusiastically agrees. You abandon the project, leaving another half-built monument to your potential to gather dust, and you pivot to the next shiny new idea. You convince yourself that you just haven't found your true passion yet. But passion is not the problem, my friend. The problem is your fundamental operating system. To truly grasp why your brilliant mind refuses to cooperate with your long-term ambitions, we must look closely at how you are biologically wired to interact with the world. We must listen to Dr. William Dodson, a leading psychiatrist who has profoundly shifted our understanding of the ADHD brain. Dr. Dodson articulates a concept that explains the core mystery of your existence: the fundamental difference between the importance-based nervous system and the interest-based nervous system. The neurotypical world, the world of schools, corporations, tax codes, and societal expectations, is built entirely upon the importance-based nervous system. In this world, people are motivated to do things because they are important, because they have long-term consequences, or because an authority figure told them to do it. A neurotypical person can look at a stack of boring paperwork and say, "I do not want to do this. It is incredibly tedious. But if I do not do this, I will lose my job or face a penalty. Therefore, I will sit down and do it." Their brain generates the necessary chemical motivation based on the importance of the task. You, however, do not possess an importance-based nervous system. You possess an interest-based nervous system. For you, the concepts of importance, long-term consequences, or should, hold almost zero chemical weight in your brain. You can know with your high IQ that a task is of life or death importance. You can understand the devastating consequences of not doing it. You can scream at yourself in the mirror to just sit down and do the thing. But if the task does not meet specific, immediate criteria, your brain simply will not supply the dopamine required to initiate action. Dr. Dodson identifies the only 4 triggers that reliably activate the ADHD interest-based nervous system: novelty, passion, challenge, and urgency. Let us break these down, because they are the invisible masters of your fate. First, novelty. Your brain is a novelty-seeking missile, a new idea, a new hobby, a new relationship. These things flood your system with dopamine. You become obsessed. You dive in with a terrifying intensity, learning everything there is to know, mastering the basics in record time. Your high IQ allows you to assimilate the new information brilliantly. But the half-life of novelty is ruthlessly short. The moment the new thing becomes familiar, the moment it requires maintenance rather than discovery, the dopamine dries up, and your brain recoils as if touching a hot stove. Second, passion. When you are genuinely, deeply interested in a subject, you do not just learn it, you consume it. You enter states of hyperfocus where time ceases to exist. You can produce masterworks in these states. But passion is a weather system. It rolls in and it rolls out. You cannot command the weather, and you cannot build a reliable, structural life on the assumption that you will always feel passionately about the work you need to do. Third, challenge, or more specifically, competition and contrarianism. If someone tells you that you cannot do something, or if you find yourself in a high-stakes debate where you need to prove a point, your brain suddenly snaps into crystalline focus. Your intellect sharpens into a weapon. But again, you cannot live your entire life in a state of reactionary combat. It is exhausting, and it leaves you at the mercy of external provocations. And finally, urgency. This is the darkest and most destructive master of them all. This is the panic monster. When a deadline is 3 weeks away, the task is invisible to your nervous system. But when the deadline is in 3 hours and catastrophic failure is breathing down your neck, the sheer terror finally jolts your adrenal system. Your brain floods with cortisol and adrenaline, bypassing the broken dopamine pathways, and you execute a frantic, chaotic miracle, finishing the project just as the sun comes up. Your high IQ has allowed you to survive by relying on these 4 triggers, particularly urgency. You have learned that if you wait until the absolute last minute, the panic will force you to act, and your raw intelligence will usually be enough to produce a result that is good enough to get by. But good enough is the enemy of greatness. And living crisis to crisis is a profound betrayal of your potential. This is where the myth of raw potential becomes a trap. You use your high IQ to rationalize your lack of execution. You tell yourself, I work best under pressure. You tell yourself, I'm just a big picture thinker. I don't do details. You build an arrogant identity around your intellect to shield yourself from the humiliating reality that you lack the basic, fundamental discipline to govern your own actions. You look down on the diligent, consistent people who methodically grind away at their goals, secretly viewing them as less imaginative or less brilliant than you. But those consistent, diligent people are passing you by. They are building the empires, writing the books, and shaping the world, while you are sitting in your bedroom, doom-scrolling through the achievements of others, paralyzed by the weight of your own unexecuted brilliance. You must realize that your intelligence is not a substitute for character. It is not a substitute for grit. It is not a substitute for systems. Raw computing power is entirely useless if the software is corrupted by avoidance and cheap dopamine. The comforting illusion of the gifted label has given you a false sense of security. It has whispered to you that because you are smart, things should eventually fall into place. But the universe does not care how high your IQ is. The universe only recognizes action. The universe only rewards output. When you sit alone in the dark, bathed in the blue light of your phone, endlessly consuming the shallow, fragmented content of the modern internet, you are actively choosing the path of least resistance. You are feeding your interest-based nervous system with the emptiest, most toxic form of novelty available. You are hiding from the friction of the real world because the real world requires effort, and effort triggers the deeply ingrained fear of your fixed mindset. You must understand the profound danger of this comfort. It is not a violent death of your dreams. It is a slow, quiet freezing. It is the gradual erosion of your self-esteem as you watch year after year slip by, your grand visions remaining locked inside the vault of your skull. You become a cynic. You become bitter. You start to believe that the world is rigged or that people just don't understand your vision. But the truth, the harsh, liberating truth, is that no one owes you understanding. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to reach into your mind, extract your brilliant ideas, and do the heavy lifting of building them for you. If you are to break free from this paralyzing dynamic, you must perform a radical act of humility. You must step down from the pedestal of your unearned potential. You must grieve the loss of the magical future, where everything was supposed to be easy for you, because you were smart. You must look in the mirror and say, my intellect is a tool, but it is not the master. My brain is wired for novelty, but I cannot build a legacy on fleeting interests. My reliance on panic and urgency is destroying my health and sabotaging my true capacity. You must embrace the terrifying reality that to achieve the greatness you know you are capable of, you will have to do the one thing your biology and your psychology have desperately tried to avoid. You will have to endure the boredom of sustained effort. You will have to learn how to operate without motivation. You will have to build a life where action dictates feeling rather than waiting for feeling to dictate action. The gap between who you are and who you are meant to be cannot be bridged by a sudden epiphany or a surge of willpower. Willpower, for the ADHD brain, is a finite and rapidly depleting resource. You cannot white-knuckle your way to consistency. Instead, you must become an architect. You must stop trying to fix the broken CEO in your brain and start building external structures that render that CEO obsolete. You must stop relying on your internal chemistry and start relying on external physics. We are moving past the diagnosis. We are moving past the tragedy of the gifted child. We have identified the enemy, and the enemy is not your lack of ability. It is your reliance on it. The enemy is the chaotic, unmanaged environment that allows your primitive urges to hijack your brilliant mind. The time for waiting is over. The time for rationalization is over. It is time to roll up your sleeves, descend from the lofty heights of pure thought, and get your hands dirty in the machinery of execution. We have stood together in the wreckage of your unfulfilled potential. We have looked the beast in the eye, stripping away the comforting illusions of your raw intellect, and we have acknowledged the biological reality of your dopamine-starved mind. You understand now why the old ways, the frantic, last-minute scrambles, the reliance on sudden bursts of passion, the desperate hope that tomorrow you magically wake up as a different, more disciplined person, have failed you. They will always fail you. You cannot outthink a neurobiological deficit, my friend. Your high IQ is a magnificent processor, but it is fundamentally incapable of generating the neurochemicals required to execute a sustained, multi-year vision on its own. So what is left? If willpower is a brittle illusion and motivation is a ghost that haunts you only in the dead of night, how do we build the bridge between the immense brilliance of your mind and the physical reality of your life? We stop trying to heal the broken CEO in your brain. We stop waiting for the internal executive function to suddenly show up for work. Instead, we fire the internal CEO entirely, and we build an external one. We transition from the realm of desperate, internal wishing to the cold, unbreakable realm of external architecture. You must become the ruthless, calculating engineer of your own existence. You must elevate yourself above your own impulses and build a system that governs your behavior with the immutable laws of physics. This is the architecture of execution. It is the profound realization that systems are eternal, while motivation is fleeting. To build this architecture, we must first shatter the final, most stubborn lie your high IQ ego tells you, the lie that you need to feel like doing the work in order to do it. Because of your intellect, you have developed a devastatingly articulate inner monologue. When faced with a difficult, boring task, writing the code, formatting the manuscript, doing the bookkeeping, your mind immediately begins to generate highly logical, persuasive arguments as to why now is not the right time. You tell yourself the lighting is wrong. You tell yourself you need to research just one more article. You tell yourself you're too tired and the work will be subpar. Therefore, it is better to wait until you are fully rested. Your intellect is weaponized against your progress. It constructs elegant, bulletproof rationalizations for your procrastination. And because your ADHD brain is desperately trying to avoid the steep dopamine drop of a low-stimulation task, it eagerly accepts these rationalizations as undeniable truth. You must learn to divorce your actions from your feelings. You must accept a harsh, liberating axiom. Your feelings are largely irrelevant to your execution. The bricklayer does not need to feel passionately inspired by the brick in order to lay it straight. He simply applies the mortar and sets the stone, relying on the system of the plumb line. To build your plumb line, we look to the masterclass of behavioral design laid out by James Clear in his definitive work, Atomic Habits. Clear articulates a truth that is absolute poison to the ego of the gifted individual, but is the absolute salvation of the ADHD mind. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Your goals are spectacular. They are the visions of a genius. But your systems, the actual physical routines that govern your Tuesday mornings and your Thursday afternoons, are broken, chaotic, and heavily biased toward cheap dopamine. If you rely on your goals to pull you forward, your executive dysfunction will sever the rope. You must instead rely on the conveyor belt of a meticulously designed environment to push you forward, even when you are kicking and screaming. The core pillar of James Clear's philosophy is environment design. For the neurotypical person, environment design is a helpful productivity hack. For the high IQ individual with ADHD, it is a matter of life and death. Remember, your brain is a violently reactive mechanism. It does not initiate well, but it responds with terrifying speed to whatever is in its immediate field of vision. If you place a bowl of apples on the counter, you will eat apples. If you place a glowing screen engineered by thousands of the smartest behavioral scientists on Earth within arm's reach of your workspace, you will doom scroll. You are taking a starving, impulsive animal and placing it inside a slaughterhouse, expecting it to calmly eat a salad. You must design an environment that makes failure difficult and success automatic. You must manipulate the physical friction of your life. Friction is the energy required to begin an action. Right now, the friction required to start your meaningful work is a towering, unscalable mountain. You have to open the laptop, find the file, remember where you left off, confront the overwhelming size of the project, and fight the paralyzing perfectionism of your high IQ. Meanwhile, the friction required to escape into the mediocre void of the internet is practically zero. A flick of the thumb, a glance at a biometric scanner, and you are instantly sedated by a flood of algorithmically curated novelty. We must invert this dynamic. We must become architects of friction. You must intentionally, brutally increase the friction between your mind and your vices. If you are addicted to the doom scroll, willpower will not save you when the craving hits. You must build a fortress, delete the applications. If that is not enough, use software to block the websites at the router level. Put the smartphone in a timed lockbox in another room while you work. Buy a secondary primitive phone that only makes calls and texts, and leave the smart device in your car. Your high IQ ego will immediately rebel against this. It will say, "This is extreme. I am an adult. I should be able to simply exercise self-control." But I ask you, my friend, how has that strategy worked for you so far? Look at the graveyard of your wasted days. Honor the reality of your neurobiology. Building a fortress is not a sign of weakness. It is the ultimate expression of strategic intelligence. It is the general securing his borders before he goes to war. Conversely, you must violently eliminate the friction between yourself and your meaningful work. If you want to write a book, the document must open automatically when your computer turns on, occupying the entire screen with the internet disabled. If you want to build a physical product, the tools must be laid out on the workbench the night before, pre-assembled, waiting for your hands. You must make the right behavior the path of absolute least resistance. When your dopamine-starved brain desperately looks around for something to do, the only accessible, frictionless option must be the work that elevates you. But manipulating the physical environment is only half the architecture. The other half is manipulating your neurochemistry. To do this, we turn to the rigorous, cutting-edge neurobiological protocols detailed by Dr. Andrew Huberman of Stanford University. Dr. Huberman's work on the dopamine system reveals the mechanical truth behind your suffering. Dopamine is not simply a reward you get after you do something pleasurable. It is the currency of motivation that precedes the action. The tragedy of your ADHD brain is that your baseline level of this currency is chronically low. When you wake up and immediately reach for your phone, flooding your brain with the hyper-stimulating light and information of social media, you are intentionally bankrupting your dopamine account for the rest of the day. You trigger a massive, unnatural spike. And because the brain is a closed system that ruthlessly pursues equilibrium, that spike is followed by a brutal, prolonged trough. You spend the rest of your day in a chemically induced depression, feeling lethargic, unmotivated, and incapable of tackling the complex, high-friction tasks that your intellect demands. You have spent your entire motivational budget in the first 20 minutes of your morning on the digital equivalent of cotton candy. To build an unbreakable life, you must become a miser with your dopamine. You must learn the protocols of protecting your baseline. This means the morning routine is not a luxury. It is the foundation of your architectural scaffold. Huberman's protocols dictate that you must delay cheap dopamine at all costs. You wake up. The phone remains untouched, locked away. You seek natural sunlight in your eyes immediately, triggering the cortisol pulse that establishes your circadian rhythm and naturally elevates your alertness. You engage in physical movement, generating an internal, sustainable wave of dopamine through effort, not through passive consumption. You must learn to leverage the power of deliberate, structured discomfort. The ADHD brain runs from discomfort like a prey animal running from a predator. But Huberman's research on deliberate cold exposure, such as a cold shower or an ice bath, reveals a profound neurobiological hack. When you intentionally subject yourself to a high-friction, deeply uncomfortable physical state, your brain responds by releasing a steady, prolonged wave of dopamine and norepinephrine that lasts for hours after the event. By doing the hardest, most aversive thing first, you chemically armor your brain, giving it the sustained baseline motivation required to sit down and do the tedious, unglamorous work of building your empire. You are no longer a victim of your chemical deficits. You are a chemist, using the physical actions of your body to synthesize the motivation your brain refuses to provide naturally. But even with the environment designed and the neurochemistry optimized, the high IQ mind faces one final deadly trap: the tyranny of scale. Because your mind operates at such a high conceptual level, you despise small things. You think in grand, sweeping epics. When you decide to finally get your life together, your intellect designs a master plan that is awe-inspiring in its complexity. You resolve to wake up at 4 a.m., meditate for an hour, run 10 miles, read a book a day, and work on your business for 12 hours straight. This is not a system. This is a manic episode fueled by the sudden dopamine hit of a novel idea, and it is doomed to fail catastrophically. The moment you miss a single step, the moment the sheer, crushing weight of that monumental expectation hits your executive dysfunction, the entire structure collapses. You retreat to the void, filled with shame, confirming your deepest fear, that you are incapable of change. To bypass this tripwire, we return to James Clear and the concept of the aggregation of marginal gains. You must undergo a profound ego death. You must surrender your desire to conquer Rome in a day, and you must learn the excruciating humility of the micro-habit. A micro-habit is a behavior so small, so laughably insignificant, that even your paralyzing executive dysfunction cannot find a reason to reject it. If your goal is to write a thesis, your micro-habit is not right for 4 hours. Your micro-habit is open the laptop and write one single sentence. If your goal is to organize your chaotic financial life, your micro-habit is not balance all the accounts. It is log into the bank app and look at the balance for 10 seconds. Your high IQ ego will scream at this. It will tell you that writing one sentence is pathetic. It will tell you that looking at your bank account for 10 seconds is a waste of your massive intellectual processing power. It will demand leaps, not crawling. But you must ignore the ego. The ego has kept you paralyzed in the golden cage for years. The micro-habit is a Trojan horse. It is designed to bypass the amygdala, the fear center of your brain that interprets large, complex tasks as threats. By lowering the bar to the floor, you eliminate the friction of starting. And starting, for the ADHD brain, is 99% of the battle. Physics dictates that an object at rest stays at rest, but an object in motion stays in motion. Once you sit down and write that single sentence, the massive, overwhelming friction of initiation is gone. You are in motion. Often that one sentence becomes a paragraph, which becomes a page, which becomes a chapter. But even if it remains just one sentence, you have won, because you have cast a vote for your new identity. You have proven to your brain that you are a person who shows up, regardless of how you feel. You are building a chain of consistency. And for the chaotic, novelty-seeking mind, consistency is the ultimate superpower. Do not underestimate the compounding mathematics of marginal gains. If you improve by just 1% every day, mathematically, you are 37 times better by the end of the year. The brilliant, high IQ mind that learns to harness the terrifying power of compounded daily effort is an unstoppable force of nature. It is the combination of the lightning strike and the glacier, possessing the sudden, blinding flash of genius, but backed by the slow, crushing, inevitable momentum of daily systems. This is how you escape the trap. You stop trying to force your brain to care about the abstract, distant future, and you focus entirely on the sacred geometry of your daily routine. You build a scaffold so rigid and so well-designed that even on your worst days, the days when the dopamine is entirely depleted, when the brain fog rolls in thick and heavy, when the siren song of the doomscroll is screaming in your ears, the system holds you upright. You wake up. The phone is locked away. You get the sunlight. You take the cold shower. You sit at the desk, where the tools are already laid out. You execute the micro-habit. You lay the single brick. It will not feel glorious. It will not feel like the sudden, intoxicating rush of raw inspiration you have been chasing your whole life. In fact, it will feel mechanical. It will feel mundane. But within that mundane, mechanical repetition lies the alchemy of true transformation. By externalizing your executive function into your environment, you free up your massive intellectual bandwidth. Your high IQ is no longer wasting its cycles generating excuses or fighting the gravitational pull of cheap distractions. It is finally liberated to do what it was meant to do, to solve, to create, to innovate, and to conquer the complex problems of the work itself. You are building the chassis. You are connecting the transmission. The Formula One engine of your mind is finally being bolted down to a structure that can handle its immense horsepower. But there is a final trial. The architecture of execution will get you moving. It will point you in the right direction and protect you from the worst of your impulses. But eventually, the novelty of the new system will wear off. The micro-habits will lose their charm. The profound, aching boredom of sustained effort will settle over you like a heavy blanket. When the system ceases to be interesting, when the external CEO can no longer completely shield you from the repetitive grind of greatness, you will encounter the final frontier. You will face the crucible that breaks the tragic geniuses and forges the elevated masters. You will have to learn how to suffer well. You will have to learn the brutal, unglamorous art of grit. You have built the architecture. You have manipulated the physical friction of your life, chaining the beast of your impulses to the immovable pillars of environment design. You have engineered your mornings, protected your baseline dopamine, and embraced the excruciating humility of the micro-habit. You have, for the first time in your life, bypassed the broken executive function of your brilliant, chaotic mind. And for a while, it works beautifully. The first few weeks of this new architecture are intoxicating. Your high IQ, starved for so long of actual, tangible progress, suddenly sees the immediate results of your newly structured life. You write the pages, You build the code. You clean the spaces. You feel a surge of a new kind of dopamine, not the cheap synthetic rush of the doomscroll, but the deep, resonant satisfaction of self-mastery. The system is novel, and your interest-based nervous system feasts upon the novelty of being disciplined. But then, the inevitable happens. The novelty wears off. The micro-habits that felt like a brilliant strategic game suddenly feel like a chore. The meticulously designed morning routine that once felt like a profound ritual devolves into a mundane, predictable sequence of grey events. The massive intellectual capacity of your brain, which was briefly amused by the puzzle of organizing your life, begins to rebel against the very structure that saved it. It looks at the endless stretch of days ahead, the Tuesday mornings and the Thursday afternoons filled with identical, repetitive tasks, and it recoils in sheer existential horror. This is the crucible. This is the valley of the shadow of death for the high IQ, ADHD mind. When the system ceases to be interesting, when the external CEO you built can no longer completely shield you from the grinding repetition of execution, you encounter the ultimate, unglamorous truth of human achievement. You discover that the dividing line between the tragic, forgotten genius and the elevated master is not intelligence. It is not even the perfection of your daily routine. It is your capacity to endure boredom. For the neurotypical mind, boredom is a mild annoyance. It is a temporary lull in stimulation, easily remedied by a change of scenery or a brief distraction. But for you, my friend, boredom is not a lull. It is an acute, agonizing neurological state. Because your brain operates at a chronic dopamine deficit, the absence of stimulation feels like physical pain. It feels like your very consciousness is suffocating. Your intellect, sensing this drop in dopamine, immediately goes to war against the work. It uses its formidable processing power to convince you that because you are bored, you must be doing the wrong thing. It whispers that if this were your true calling, you would feel a burning, unceasing passion for every single second of the process. It tells you that your brilliance is being wasted on these menial, repetitive tasks, and that you should abandon this project to seek out a new, more mentally stimulating horizon. This is the final, most devastating lie of the gifted curse. It is the myth of the perpetual flow state. You have been conditioned by the highlight reels of history and the curated narratives of modern success to believe that great men and women exist in a constant state of passionate inspiration. You believe that the great novelists wept with emotion over every sentence, that the great scientists trembled with adrenaline over every equation, and that the great builders felt a constant, roaring fire in their chests as they laid every single brick. This is a childish fantasy, and you must let it die. The reality of greatness is shockingly, painfully boring. The masterpiece is not created in a single, fiery explosion of genius. It is carved out of the bedrock of reality, through thousands upon thousands of hours of quiet, solitary, unglamorous repetition. It is the writer staring blankly at a screen, hating the words, but typing them anyway. It is the athlete running the exact same drills for the 10,000th time in the freezing rain. It is the entrepreneur looking at the exact same spreadsheet, adjusting the exact same margins, day after day after day. To bridge the gap between your massive potential and your actual reality, you must undergo a profound identity shift. You must stop identifying as a genius who relies on inspiration, and you must start identifying as a craftsman who relies on grit. To understand the absolute necessity of this transformation, we must turn to the definitive research of Dr. Angela Duckworth. In her seminal book, Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, Duckworth answers the exact question that has haunted your entire life. Why do naturally gifted individuals so frequently fail to achieve their potential, while individuals of seemingly average intelligence relentlessly climb to the absolute pinnacle of their fields? Duckworth spent years studying the most rigorous environments on Earth. The grueling training of West Point cadets, the intense competition of the National Spelling Bee, the high-stakes world of corporate sales, and the unforgiving arenas of professional sports. She measured every conceivable metric: IQ, physical aptitude, family background, and emotional intelligence. The singular, undeniable factor that predicted success across every single domain was not intelligence. It was grit. Duckworth defines grit as the sustained, passionate stamina for long-term goals. It is the ability to maintain allegiance to a single, overarching objective over a period of years or even decades, despite failure, adversity, plateaus in progress, and, most importantly for you, despite overwhelming boredom. To illustrate why this is true, Duckworth formulated two simple, devastating equations that should be etched onto the back of your eyelids. First, talent multiplied by effort equals skill. Second, skill multiplied by effort equals achievement. Look closely at those equations, my friend. Your high IQ, your rapid processing speed, your ability to see complex patterns, that is your talent. It is a massive, beautiful multiplier. But if your effort is zero, because you quit the moment you get bored, your skill is zero. And if your skill is zero, your achievement is zero. Notice that effort counts twice. The universe mathematically heavily weights perseverance over raw intellectual capacity. A person with half your talent who applies consistent, gritty effort will surpass you in skill. They will then take that newly acquired skill, apply gritty effort to it again, and completely obliterate you in achievement. This is not a theory. This is the inescapable mathematics of reality. This is why you have watched less intelligent people pass you by. They did not outsmart you, they out-endured you. They possessed the grit to stay on the treadmill when the novelty faded, while you, seduced by your interest-based nervous system, stepped off to look for a more entertaining machine. To develop grit, you must wage a holy war against your own impulsivity. You must learn to reframe the sensation of boredom. Right now, when you feel the agonizing friction of a repetitive task, your brain interprets it as a signal to flee. You must consciously override that signal. You must train your high IQ mind to interpret boredom not as a lack of meaning, but as the very anvil upon which your greatness is being forged. When you sit at your desk, and the urge to pick up your phone and doomscroll becomes a physical ache in your chest, you must recognize that moment for what it truly is. It is not a trivial urge. It is the crucible. It is the defining test of your character. In that exact second of friction, you are standing at the crossroads of your destiny. If you yield to the urge, if you open the browser, if you unlock the screen, you are actively choosing the mediocre void. You are choosing to anesthetize the pain of actualization with the cheap, toxic numbing agent of digital novelty. You are telling the universe that your comfort is more important than your legacy. But if you stay, if you grip the edge of the desk, if you take a deep breath, stare directly into the suffocating grayness of the boring task, and execute the next micro-step anyway, if you do that, you are performing an act of profound, quiet heroism. You are proving that the master of your fate is not your erratic, dopamine-starved neurochemistry, but your sovereign will. You must find the sublime within the mundane. The Zen masters understood this. They did not seek enlightenment by constantly chasing novel philosophies. They sought enlightenment by chopping wood and carrying water day after day, until the repetitive action transcended boredom and became a state of pure, gritty grace. You must become the Zen master of your own tedious execution. You must learn to love the plateau. The plateau is the long, flat stretch of the journey where no visible progress is being made. It is the months of writing where the manuscript still looks terrible. It is the year of building the business where the revenue remains stagnant. Your high IQ despises the plateau. It demands an upward exponential curve of constant immediate feedback. But growth does not happen in a straight line. It happens in quantum leaps, separated by long, agonizing plateaus of seemingly invisible, underground development. Grit is the ability to keep walking across the desert of the plateau, trusting the architecture of your daily systems, even when you cannot see the oasis. This requires a complete surrender of your ego. You must stop believing that you are too smart to do the boring work. The greatest minds in human history, the Newtons, the Einsteins, the Da Vincis, were not immune to the tedious grind. They simply possessed the gritty stamina to endure it longer than anyone else. Newton did not discover calculus in a sudden flash of inspiration under an apple tree. He spent years alone in a room, obsessively performing mind-numbing, repetitive calculations until the fabric of the universe revealed itself to him. He endured the crucible, and you must do the same. The choice before you is absolute. It is a binary divergence in the timeline of your existence, and it allows for no compromise. Path A is the path of least resistance. It is the path your biology wants you to take. It is the path of the golden cage. You can close this video, pick up your phone, and return to the infinite scroll. You can continue to rely on the frantic panic of the last minute to scrape by. You can continue to use your immense intellect to generate brilliant excuses for your lack of execution. You can live a comfortable, highly stimulated, utterly forgettable life. But you know how that path ends. It ends in a quiet, devastating tragedy. It ends decades from now, with you sitting in a room, surrounded by the ghosts of the things you never built, the books you never wrote, and the potential you never fully realized. It ends with the bitter, agonizing realization that you possessed the raw materials to build a cathedral, but you lacked the grit to lay the stones, and so you died in a shack of your own making. Path B is the path of the mountain. It is the path of the elevated within. It requires you to fire your internal CEO and build an unbreakable external architecture. It requires you to violently sever your addiction to cheap dopamine. It requires you to embrace the microhabit, design your environment, and manipulate the physical friction of your life. And above all, it requires you to look the terrifying boredom of sustained effort directly in the eye, and walk into it with your shoulders back and your head held high. It will be the hardest thing you have ever done. Your mind will scream at you to stop. The modern world will constantly pull at your sleeves, offering you infinite, frictionless escapes into the digital void. You will fail. You will stumble. There will be days when the ADHD paralysis wins, and you spend 4 hours staring at a wall. But when you fall, you will not judge yourself with the harsh perfectionism of the gifted ego. You will simply look at your systems, adjust the environment, and lay the next brick. You will rely on the aggregation of marginal gains to carry you forward. Because on this path, you are no longer a victim of your brilliant, broken mind. You are the architect of its salvation. You are forging an unbreakable chain of gritty, mundane, deeply beautiful consistency. And as you lay those bricks, day after day, month after month, year after year, a profound alchemy will occur. The gap between your immense potential and your actual reality will begin to close. The silent, restless hum of unfulfilled purpose will fade, replaced by the solid, unshakable resonance of a life fully executed. You will look back at the golden cage, and you will realize that the door was never locked. You simply had to endure the heavy, tedious friction of pushing it open. This is your calling. This is the demand that your intellect places upon your soul. You are built for greatness, my friend. But greatness is not granted to the smart. It is earned by the relentless. The world does not need more brilliant minds hiding in the digital void. The world desperately needs your specific, actualized genius. The world needs the cathedral only you can build. Reject the mediocrity of the modern trap. Embrace the crucible of grit. Build your systems, lay your bricks, and elevate yourself to the magnificent heights you were always meant to inhabit. If this message has struck the chord of truth within you, if you are ready to stop running from the friction and start building your legacy, then I ask you, as a brother on this path, to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let us grow this community of the elevated within. Let us hold each other to the highest possible standard of our own potential. The work begins now. I will see you on the mountain. Farewell.